together one day. I wanna.
This is a very important utility committee meeting because we get to address both the budget as well as being able to look at how we can integrate our solar more effectively. And so with no more ado, we'll have Mr. Beckham get us started.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the mayor mentioned, we're going to talk about the budget, and we're going to talk about a really interesting solar project, microgrid type project that we are looking into. We went to Commissioner Madden, committee member Detzavon, and myself, Cindy Clemens, went to the APPA National Conference in Seattle last week and heard quite a bit about microgrids and a lot of other things. So this is going to be an important piece of, I think, of our moving forward into the future of electrification and generation. So one thing before we get started, though, during that conference, Cindy Clemens, our manager of regulatory and legislative and regulatory relations, received a nice reward. As you see on the screen there, she's a recipient of this year's Harold Kramer John Preston Personal Service Award for service to APPA, which is a nationwide organization. That's a big deal. So Cindy, congratulations.
It's a major deal. Good job. Super congrats.
You're going to hear more from Cindy shortly, but first we're going to talk about the budget. Gina Jacoby.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I need to get this set right. Well, LE's finalized its preliminary budget, and I say it's preliminary because we still haven't factored in the effects of the wage study that the city is currently undergoing, as well as we're currently in negotiations with the UWUA for their upcoming contract. So those factors haven't been incorporated in our budget. We'll overlay those once we get the impacts of those two projects. Please note that I'm going to be looking at the budget at a very high level, and if anybody wants to delve into the numbers, I'm more than happy to walk you through the details on a one-on-one basis. So I'm always available if you have questions. So let's get started. I want to apologize, it's a busy table, but whenever you deal with the budget, you're going to be dealing with a lot of numbers. So I want to apologize in advance. What you're looking here right here on the slide is our net cash funding, which I view as a proxy for our net cash flow. And the table excludes fuel because fuel is a pass-through. And so therefore, I've omitted fuel so that it doesn't, because it can mess up or skew not skew the results, but skew the comparisons. So I'm comparing our budget to the forecast that we presented when we did the rate study. And the reason for this is because the rate ordinance that was approved earlier this year gave the City Commission the ability to tweak the rate increase, the October 2023 rate increase, depending upon our performance, our financial performance. So hence, that's why I'm comparing those two forecasts. The budgeted bottom line is worse than projected during the rate study. And I'm going to walk you through the table line item by line item and identify the major drivers of the shortfall. The biggest unfavorable variance by far is in our non-fuel operating revenue, which is down $6.1 million. And let me explain to you what happened. When we were putting together our rate study, we looked at what our load growth had been over the past previous years, and we had been running in the 2 to 3% range. We had anticipated that load would continue to grow at that same rate. Unfortunately, this year we've seen a decline in our load on a weather-normalized basis. By weather-normalized, weather can affect the load growth, so what we do is we pull the weather impacts out so that we can compare years over years to years. So we're comparing apples to apples. So let me, what we experienced was we had expected a load growth of 2 to 3%, got a load decline this year, and we're anticipating a 0.4% growth in load year over year between fiscal year '23 and fiscal year '24. And there are a number of reasons for this decline. First of all, we're seeing the impact of economic conditions. People are tightening their belts, cutting back on their electricity. That's one of the areas that they can cut back on. We're also seeing the effects of people returning to work from working from home, so that's having some effect on our residential sales. Change in our building type. With a lot of the new construction that's coming online, it's very fuel efficient compared to the existing buildings that are currently in our stock. We're also seeing people changing out their appliances for more energy efficiency appliances. We're looking also at people changing out their LEDs, so they're focused on reducing their energy consumption. And lastly, we're beginning to feel, and this is a very slight impact, I don't want to make it sound larger than it really is, it's very slight, but we're beginning to see the impact of solar on our load. Our customers are beginning to install more and more solar. By solar, I mean rooftop solar. And for example, 2 years ago, we were adding about 17 customers a month. This year, we're adding an average of 50 customers a month, rooftop solar customers. And this is accelerating. The past couple of months, we've seen 75 to 100 customers, rooftop customers, adding solar to their houses. At this point, I'm not that concerned about this 6.1 million shortfall, and the reason being weather. As I mentioned, weather, we are assuming normal weather. Over the past 5 years, weather has added 4.6 million to our bottom line. So I anticipate if weather continues to be warm, that we'll have, there should be some upside potential from the weather. Again, some years we see tremendous impact from weather. Some years we don't. I'm just giving you an average. So moving down to the next line item, we anticipate less revenue from our 2.25% rate increase that had been stipulated in the ordinance. That's down slightly just because of load. Our non-fuel O&M budget is expected to increase $800,000. That's 1% over where we thought we were going to be, and this is due to the delay in LE's landfill project. What happened was we had originally anticipated covering our landfill with artificial turf, but due to environmental concerns, we've decided to go ahead and cover it with clay as well as natural turf. What this has done, it doesn't really change the price of the landfill project, but it does shift it into fiscal year '24 because now we're having to replan our project. Our rate-funded capital is budgeted to increase $1.9 million from where we thought we were going to be. This is up 5%. Both the delivery side as well as the production side, their capital budgets came in as expected at $40.5 million. The variance really lies with the capital that we're spending on other projects, and it's primarily one big project, which is a non-discretionary expenditure. We are mandated to update our bathrooms here in the administration building to make them ADA compliant, and the cost to do so came in considerably higher than we had originally anticipated. We had budgeted $150,000 this fiscal year and $150,000 next fiscal year to do this project. Lo and behold, the architect gave us an estimate of $1.2 million to do all the bathrooms in this building. So again, this is non-discretionary. This is something that we have to do and don't have well, like I said, it's mandated. Debt service is up $1.8 million, and this reflects the new bond issue that we anticipate issuing towards the end of this fiscal year. The $1.8 million reflects the increase in interest expense. This is a fixed cost going forward, so every year from now on and into the future, we'll be incurring this additional interest expense associated with the new debt. Dividends to the city, you'll see are budgeted to decrease, and this has to do with the decline in load that we're projecting. Again, if the weather's favorable, dividends will come in higher than anticipated. And finally, our investment income is up $2.1 million from where we thought it was going to be, and that really has to do with interest rates and the performance we've seen to date. So, to summarize, we are coming in unfavorable to where we thought we were going to be by the tune of $8.3 million. The bulk of that has to do with the revenue side, but as I mentioned before, I think weather will offset some of that. This is a business risk that we incur and we have to manage. So if we see that weather doesn't materialize, we will have to manage that through O&M as well as capital cuts. So this is something that we do on a normal routine basis. The other impact that we see is the $1.8 million increase due to the incremental debt that we will be assuming starting next year. Finally, let's look at our projected days cash, which is at the bottom of the table. We target, as you know, 180 days cash. This is what Moody's likes to see us at. And based on our performance to date, as well as the shortfall, the budgeted cash drawdown, we're now projecting days cash of 173. That range is still within the AA range for municipal utilities, but again, it is below where Moody's would like us to be. Again, I look at weather as a potential upside to this. If weather does come in, we're looking at days cash of about 179. So still below the 180, but better than the 173. So what does all this mean? So based on the days cash that we're seeing, staff recommends that we increase our stipulated rate increase that's in the rate ordinance from 2.25% to 3.5%. This will generate an additional $1.9 million and will offset the increase in our debt service associated with the new bond issue. We feel that the rest of the shortfall we can cover. As I said, it's a business risk, and we will manage internally. But the 1.9 is, like I said, a fixed cost that will be going on throughout the years. It will also increase our days cash by 2, so from 173 to 175. And I think that'll be slightly more acceptable to the rating agencies. The rate increase would result in an average increase to our residential bills. They would increase $2.73 per month. That's up 97 cents from the increase they would have experienced had we stuck with the 2.25% rate increase that was stipulated by the rate ordinance. The good news is, and there is a silver lining, if natural gas prices remain where they are right now, and they're in the $2.50 to $2.70 range, we anticipate that we'll be able to decrease our fuel rate $3 to $5 in October. So that the same time that we're raising our base rates, we anticipate we'll be able to lower our fuel rates to offset that. So that is good news. And I wanted to finish off by taking a look at our rates compared to those of our peers. This is using the latest information I could get from the FMEA. I plotted the bills for residential customers consuming 1,200 kilowatt hours per month. That's pretty close to average. And our rates, we're the bar in green. And as you can see, our rates are among the lowest when compared to those of our peers. And matter of fact, there's only a $1 difference between us and JEA, which is the lowest. So we're essentially neck and neck on the lowest side. And the reason why I'm showing you this chart is to give you an indication of what would happen If we did raise rates 3.5% instead of the 2.25%, assuming that there is no corresponding drop in the fuel rate, so this would be the worst-case scenario, the $2.73 increase wouldn't move the needle. We'd still be among the lowest among our peers, and it wouldn't change our ranking at all. We'd still be second to last. So with that, I'm open to questions. I'm sure you have a lot of questions regarding the proposal that we're making.
I do, and I'll start with, which is, I love that we make it a priority to be 180 days or more in days cash and to meet what Moody's rankings are, because we are the beneficiaries of that when we go to bonding.
That's correct.
So why are we at 3.5 instead of 4?
I calculated the rate increase we would need to get to 180 days, and you're looking at a 7% rate increase. So, and again, I anticipate that there should be some weather impact, so we'll get some upside from that.
There's some conservatism in this
Yes.
that you're hoping
Yes.
for. Okay, I can rest in that more. Other committee member questions? Committee member Reed.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina. On page 3, what is the average kilowatt people use per month? You know, I haven't looked at my bill that often. I know my wife raises Cain to me when she gets the bill because I don't turn off the light, stuff like that. But
The average,
so when I get home, I want to know how much more I use than somebody else does.
our average is about $11.50 per month. So FMEA doesn't, they show 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, and they show 1,200. So we use 1,200 as a proxy for our average customer, because it's pretty close to the 11.50. Pardon me?
1,200 is the number.
1,200 is a good number,
The average.
for the average.
The other thing is that if you use some of the thermostats that, like Nest, they will give you a comparison to Florida users on the utility, on the air conditioning and heating side, on a month-by-month basis as part of the report. And it's kind of interesting to see, because that becomes something you can work to beat a little bit, being in the top 10 percentile of users or whatever it is. Other questions, comments? Yes, go ahead and stop.
Have we factored in any electrical vehicles? And the reason I ask that is I have more coworkers who they're taking advantage of the Teslas and they're buying Teslas, but I know they don't have solar. So they don't have solar, but they're buying electric vehicles. That should be able to bring their rates, the load up.
Yes. We do incorporate EVs in our load forecast. Unfortunately, in Polk County, we're not seeing the great increase in EVs that maybe California is seeing or some other states are experiencing, or even down south in Miami. But we have incorporated that. Again, it's a very slight impact to our load at this point in time. We anticipate that over time that it'll have more of an impact, but currently it's very slight.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Committee Member Hamilton.
The recommendation that you make for 3.5, I believe when we talked about 2.25, it was 2.25 at one point and then 2.25 at another point and then so on. Would this 3.5% be only for the first period and then drop back to 2.25?
Yes, that's correct. Again, subject to the city commission and our financial performance. If we come in strong next year, then the commission has the ability to tweak the rate down if we have super warm weather or something
And
materializes.
it's reserve-driven in the decision-making primarily. Yes, sir. Okay. All right, good. And if you think of something else you want to add later, don't hesitate to ask. Are there any other comments or inputs? And did you hear anything nationally that would tie to some of this at all at your meeting in terms of rates? And you might want to make a comment. Go ahead.
Sure. So when we were at the national conference, we split up and we attended multiple different sessions. I'm not going to go over all of them, but definitely had opportunity to meet with the vendor who's going to do a presentation today. Asked him a lot of legal and insurance questions and technical and safety questions. So look forward to hearing what they have to offer today. There was a couple sessions on national gas pricing and the shortage and new technologies and how that's all impacted. Then also the solar market, because the lead times for all the materials is going up a lot. So even if everybody wanted solar, that's going to be
It's
interesting.
interesting.
There's a lot of tax credits that I didn't know about, but if we get the right combination of tax credits, it might be worth it to try out some new stuff. And then grid safety, that was something I brought up a few months ago. So I had a chance to talk to, it was 2 people from Department of Homeland Security. They both had PhDs and had a great session. I made sure to reach out to them, so I reached out to Mike, and maybe we can follow up with how we can do stuff, but we'll do that offline since it's security.
Great.
Some of the notes.
Thank you. Commissioner Madden?
So it was really interesting because of the disruption and the emerging tech and so many people exploring and doing demonstration projects, it's interesting to see across the board and across the country, people's eyes are on the new scale, the small modular nuclear reactor. How's that coming along? Well, it's through all their permitting and their construction. 2026 they'll construct. 2029 they'll have their first module up. 2030 they'll have all 6 unless there's a glitch. So no one knows if they can be able to go to nuclear, and if they can, the amount of power that can produce versus a state full of solar panels. And then, you have we went through COVID and the supply chains. They talk about the tariffs that we have on China and how that disrupts the whole manufacturing of the solar panels. And then you think about EV adoption, and yeah, that gives us load, but then you have an announcement from Toyota that they're going to, they have a pilot for an internal combustion hydrogen car. And so what if instead of like following Elon Musk going with the battery, because now we're seeing shortages in lithium and things like that, that if all of a sudden the market turns towards hydrogen because it goes back into the grid, and then it also does all the ammonia and steel and those things, and cars start to use that as a gas instead of having to charge. You think of a state like Florida who has to evacuate, and we've been really behind the scenes thinking about how we would even put all the infrastructure for charging, and then you think about people who are clean, who are charging their clean car with, fossil fuel energy. It's like we're so close on so many things that it's almost like, Gina and her team in Lake Electric, it's like we're on a good, healthy pause, not doing anything crazy or like,
And doing it
bleeding,
incrementally.
edge. And then waiting to see, because we're just really close on some technologies and some breakthroughs that could then show us, where we're going ahead. So I think that was kind of my biggest takeaway is like, standing room only in the nuclear, everyone's questioning about the solar because so many people were getting those grants and opportunities, but then that shuts down the supply side, So it's like we're all right here in this moment, just holding on, hoping natural gas, because that's what we can use, that the gas prices stay low. To Gina's point, if the natural gas stays low and our weather's fine, we are doing really well, not doing anything crazy, right now, until we kind of see what the future, where everyone's gonna head. So that was kind of my main takeaway about like what we're doing now. And yeah, there's complications and problems in the prices, like you see with everything, the bathrooms and it's just exorbitant in everything, the area of construction on our city commission side with whatever we're doing. So
I appreciate those comments, and they're very pertinent as we think about what we're going to do for budgeting and the incremental steps that Ellie is taking. The RICE is a piece of that, as we go forward. And so it's nice to be in a position where we are deliberate but with appropriate pause. It's very Publix-esque. And I think in terms of management, it really is in style. That was Publix in my comment. Publix-esque. Okay. Other comments? Mr. Troutman.
Stephanie and Commissioner Madden and maybe Ms. Cindy. When I attended that conference a couple of years ago, I remember Cindy set up that session with the APPA federal representative. And what's the posture of the federal government now in light of what Stephanie said, all these comments are, technology is so close to breaking through. Are they still, reticent that we're gonna follow through on this whole 2030 idea of green and energy? What was that like?
I think it's, what things drive, the market or the policy, right? And it's kind of both right now. With those grant dollars, everyone is scrambling to take hold of them. We've been happy to find that the grant dollars have been technology agnostic, that there are demonstration projects and dollars for what we're going to hear about later with regard to solar microgrids. There's technology for electrolyzers and fuel cells. And I think that at least, some people might think, we shouldn't be giving so much money away. But the only thing worse, I think, would be to give it only to one sole source or one idea at the expense of, finding some new ideas through small demonstration and pilot programs that then become the next best thing and are scalable. I think that, like we all went to EVs with lithium ion batteries because like Elon Musk, was like hydrogen silly. And so, that's where we are. The market followed that. That leader, and so, but now because there's money available, the market doesn't have to take it all themselves. Like they don't have to just put their money in a loss leader. They can say, let's do P3s, like let's get the government dollars and let's try some new technology in a few spaces and let's see which one is the best going forward. Because I think it's not whether this administration and what he believes about climate science, it's what the whole globe is headed towards. And that's a bigger snowball, or momentum that is going in a direction than one president or one, 4-year term, in America. So I think that globally everyone's going towards cleaner. It's what's going to win out. And I'm thankful to see that there are a lot of good horses to bet on, not just putting it in one technology that we feel is very intermittent, that is very inefficient and costly, because we're trying to find reliable, affordable power. So,
And hydrogen's very cost-effective after you get past the billions of dollars of infrastructure.
and listen, do you know what the thing about hydrogen is? I don't know if you've seen the new gold hydrogen. So the project in Mali where they found the gold hydrogen, which just means it's geologic, which just means it started to come up and started a fire that never went out in the middle of Africa that they've had for 15 years. That just came out, the study that they think that there is more geologic hydrogen than natural gas, and that if they could crack that nut with the same oil rigs and drilling, then we could just go straight from natural gas to hydrogen, in our internal combustion engines and pipelines. So that's huge to think you could just go from something that you're already using to something similar, and that it would be the most abundant element on the planet, versus trying to do it with solar and electrolysis and, coming up with the green hydrogen, in a more complicated, expensive fashion where it takes more power to produce it than it gives. So there's just a lot of cool stuff, we're right at the precipice of having some of these things be able to have proof of concept and scalability.
Yeah, and one interesting thing is with hydrogen, I believe we can mix it with our current equipment, right? So our natural gas power plants can use a blend of hydrogen, so it might be able to offset the cost of natural gas depending on the market and the pricing. So that way we're able to use what we have today without having to buy new infrastructure.
That's true for Rice. Is that true on 5?
Could be.
Okay.
It's possible that 5 could burn hydrogen.
Great. This is the good input for your attending, so thank you so much. We appreciate it. And any other comments? All right, what are your thoughts on the 3.5%? Yeah, I don't think you need a motion here, do you?
Just think we need a head.
I need some direction.
Okay, all right, so so make one, that's fine, that'll work.
Motion that we approve the staff recommended.
Second.
In a second. Okay, discussion by committee members. Yes, Sam. Go ahead. Oh, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Unanimously passes. You've got that support. And thank you for knowing that it was at 7 that it needed to be to get to the 180 days, because that gives us some foresight. And I hope we have some of those conservative protections that you built in place in the budget occur. And we are appreciative, and the rate payers are appreciative of the conservatism of the increase not being 7%. So thank you.
Thanks, Gina. Thank you for your support, committee and commission. And I would say if weather is something that's going to help us out, we're headed in the right direction right now because it's plenty hot out there. So I think if they, we may see an uptick in some of our revenue. So I would make a comment about that conference as a way of leading into the next presentation. I went to a presentation by the Energy Authority on gas, which was, from the ones I attended, it was by far the most well-attended. It was full, the room was packed, people lined around the walls. Everybody wants to know where gas is going because it's what we've hung our hat on for the short term at least. And it was a very good presentation. Nobody, of course, knows exactly where gas is going, but there's kind of a race from my point of view between gas production, which people are working feverishly to get more of, and liquefied natural gas, which would send our gas elsewhere. So, those two things are there's an interplay there. There's the war in Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine that plays into all of that. But I took away from that I don't see any reason that it would change drastically in the next, foreseeable future. So I think we're probably in pretty good shape with gas. As several people have mentioned, we are buying these RICE engines which are capable of burning some percent of hydrogen, so we're preparing ourselves to transition to that. And then the other thing that I heard a lot about at the conference and have heard at previous conferences is microgrid. And that clearly there's more of that around the country than I realize. There's more of it than you might think. And that clearly is a good technology for us to along our strategy of having an incremental approach toward dealing with things. As we build new subdivisions, new homes, why don't we put in the capacity for those homes to supply themselves and operate off the grid so that we're not pressured to build another big unit right away or in the foreseeable future. And possibly if all this stuff comes true, as we're being told that it will with renewables, that we'll get to that point in the future and never have to consider another big central generating unit. That's kind of the strategy, and as we've told you all along, that strategy allows us to pivot. We can move from that. We can move in a number of directions as we go along. So, but the microgrid is really interesting. Cindy Clemens is going to make this presentation on the block energy concept that she found for us, and we've been presented. And then we have a couple of folks here from Block Energy today that are going to be able to answer questions and talk all about that. So Cindy, if you will come up and make our presentation. Award-winning Cindy.
Yes, award-winning Cindy. Once again, thank you for being so excellent.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. So I'm really excited to present this to you guys today. This has been, it's a very positive project. It's been a very collaborative project. I want you guys to, I kind of want to set the tone at the beginning of this presentation that there are different components. This is, some of this project is considered, generation. Some of this project is considered energy delivery. So we've really worked, the leadership team is, Mike, Gina, Corey, Scott, all have been very involved. And then we also brought in, because it's so new and we're thinking about how it works and what are the savings or what are things that you have to spend on that you don't have to now. We brought in one of our senior engineers that I don't believe you guys have ever met, so I wanted to introduce him today. His name is Shankar Karki. And Shankar, so come on up. So Shankar is a senior engineer for us, and one of the things that he brought to the table was kind of looking at, where are you?
Yes.
Looking at the cost, right?
Yeah.
Stay close to the mic, please.
Do you want to?
I think, when you compare with the centralized generations that we produce in our McIntosh power plant, so if we compare that, because this is the distributed generations, if we compare that, the cost of generation, so you have $1 per kilowatt. And then suppose means we are spending $1,500 per kilowatt per hour RICE engines. So per year, like kind of a car payment, so you'd be paying about $200 per kilowatt year. And then the similar amount, so you'll pay for your transmission and distributions. So that's about $400 per kilowatt year total. And then suppose means this project, it's a microgrid project, it's a generation project. But if you get that price, because you avoided the transmission and distribution, and in that case, it makes sense. And then for our customers. I think that's the
Yeah.
key point.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So it was so helpful to have him kind of come in and
Thank you.
confirm for us that, that we were headed in the right direction. I felt very confident when I heard from him and his expertise. He does a lot of our Public Service Commission reports, so high-level commission reports where you have to do a lot of analysis and strategy thinking on the newer technology. So I wanted you to meet him because he's a key player, and you're probably going to see him more and more often. So with that said, let me go and just kind of start with my agenda. We're going to go how it started. We're going to introduce you to Block Energy. We're going to get into the weeds and consider some things that came up along the line, and then we'll get into next steps. So you can just stay on this slide for now, Marisol. So the reason I'm in front of you today talking about emerging technology rather than Scott, because that's what Scott typically does, this came up in a different way. I started researching all of the federal incentives that were coming down. I've been doing that for about 2 years. We've had those bills in place. And what I quickly learned is that the large grants that we could get our hands on were really something that we wanted a consortium. We wanted to work with a partner. And so I identified one grant in particular. It's called a GRIP grant. It's Grid Resiliency and Innovation Project. And I started talking to my network, asking questions, and I was introduced to this company called Block Energy. A little bit about them real fast. They are owned by a company called Emera. Emera actually owns TECO. And they're out of Canada, and they are known for being very focused on the utility and wanting to do business models and projects that benefit the utility. That appealed to us because a lot of this stuff that's happening, all this new technology, doesn't necessarily have to be owned or done by a utility. And so the fact that we have this Block Energy entity that's their focus to ensure that utilities stay relevant. And that was really important to us. So that's one of the key things I started talking to them, and they explained, and we're going to get into a second, I'll go through all of their technology, but they were really a big part. And so we formed a consortium with them and went out for the GRIP grant. And we're hoping we'll hear in September whether or not we won it. But it will help us fund this project if we do win it. But back to how we did a lot of analysis and cost analysis and how does this look being a new technology. One of the things that stands out is we will get tax credits, to what Suk was just mentioning. We will get almost 30% back on this project just through tax credits, and that's through the IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. So we are tracking on that very closely. In fact, Gina and I are going to sit down with one of her staff members who is an expert in tax. Thank God we have someone on staff that is an expert in tax. And we're going to start figuring out how we're going to get that money. So that in itself, that 30% back in tax credits, which we have not been eligible before in the past, is really going to make this project viable. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Marisol. Thanks. So this is just a really quick definition of what a microgrid is. So it's a group of interconnected loads, so the homes, and distributed energy resources, so the solar and the batteries. They can connect or disconnect from the Lakeland electric grid, and it improves customer reliability. So they can island, so let's say there's a storm and their area gets hit for whatever reason, trees are down, et cetera, they can actually island off and sustain. And there is another pilot project that's been done by TECO down in Waimama, and that's exactly what they did during Ian, is they were able to sustain themselves for several days. So now I'm going to do a real quick video that kind of just gives you the first sense of what Block Energy is and how they work.
Block Energy is a new technology that we've developed specifically for residential communities, where we use solar batteries, modern power electronics technologies to provide an autonomous community energy system.
Block Energy has benefited Tampa Electric in a couple ways. One, it's an innovative pilot project. Also, it provides a path for a long-term vision of zero carbon future.
We incorporated Block Energy into the student community because we see the value and the home buyers see the value in the technology and really little or no additional cost to them.
Block Energy has put a sense of calm upon me. I don't have to worry about losing power. I know I will always have it.
The Block Energy technology is a new tool that utilities can use in new residential development. That's to provide clean energy at very, very high levels of reliability. So it solves that problem for future energy growth.
Okay.
What?
So, I know it's tricky when you're trying to wrangle a video. So this, I'm going to walk through this to kind of underline what you just heard on the last two slides. And then please, I want to introduce right now and you know, if you have more specific technology questions on this slide or the next one, I'm more than happy to bring up our friends that are here from Block Energy. I'm going to introduce Vice President of Development is Bobby Dillow Walsh, and the head of their finance is Delane Bacon. So they're joined us today. So, and we've been working with them. I asked them this morning, I said, how long have we been working together? It's been over a year at this point. So we met them last June. So, yeah. So good stuff. So let me walk through this really quick. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a high-level hit on it. But if more questions come, we can come back to this slide as well, because this is kind of the critical slide here. So the first thing I want you to look at is the large home on the slide. So that represents, let's say that's your house, and you're going to have solar on the roof, and you're going to have this box off to the side of your home, like you saw in the video. And that in it has the battery and it has the technology. And what it does is it'll take that solar energy and it'll turn it, and this is key. Scott's like, make sure you hit on this. The black line between the house and the box, that is going into AC. So you're getting DC energy through the solar, and it's being stored in the battery as DC. But then when it enters the house, it looks just like any other customer that we already have. It's AC into the house. The house runs on AC. That means that they're metered the same, they use the same residential rate that anyone else would. There's no difference in what that looks like.
This AC is alternating current, not their air conditioning.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I know.
So the next thing that, once you kind of, that's the house unit. You move to that group of 9 homes in the center, and that is the network. So every house, it's a mesh network. They're all connected to each other. So a good example of why that works is, let's say the guy in the middle he works from home, he's got a lot of computers, and one day he's doing laundry and, I don't know, just running all kinds of electricity. And let's say that it's a cloudy day, he doesn't have a lot of solar, doesn't have a lot in his battery. He'll pull from his neighbor who's at work. And that's the thing about the technology, is that it knows how to balance itself out and say, oh, you know what, this house over here his neighbor's not here, and no one's really using any power here. Let me pull off of his battery. And then so even if, like, say one of those yellow lines something happens, a tree hits it or lightning hits it, it's a mesh network. They're not going to see a flicker. It'll continue going. And then if you continue over onto the, I guess, I'm looking at it, I'm like, is it my right and your left? But it's the right side, yeah. Right. That at the top, you'll have more batteries. It's called the Central Energy Park. You have more batteries. You'll have more technology that kind of helps control the whole neighborhood. And then you also are going to have some generation there just in case. And it's not backup generation, it's grid forming assets. They only run about 15% of the time. It's there in case it's needed. And then it connects, as you see at the bottom part, it connects to the Lakeland Electric grid. So this neighborhood of 50 to 100 homes is self-sustaining. And that's the exciting thing. And I'll get into this in a minute, but we could also use these assets as if we're having a really hot day and we're getting really close to our load. we can use this as another asset to pull, put some solar into the batteries and pull off the batteries and put it onto the grid. So kind of exciting. Do you guys have any questions at this point? Okay.
Committee member,
It's triggered a question. So when you're talking about how it's 15% usage from the Central Energy Park, in my mind, is any use from the grid going through the Central Energy Park, or only sometimes? At other times, it can go straight into the housing mesh network? Like,
I'm going to let Bobby step up and answer that one. I think I know the answer, but I think she'll speak to it better than I. Come on up.
Hi there, Bobby Dilla-Walsh here, and to maybe answer that question, the question was the grid powering the neighborhood. So the neighborhood, as Cindy explained, the yellow line is the direct current that flows, that is basically ran at the same time as any other utility infrastructure throughout that horizontal infrastructure that is throughout the neighborhood. And what that does is that gives you essentially a direct current loop throughout that neighborhood. So essentially, it's always on. So you're producing solar on the rooftop, and you're storing at the block near the homes in these block boxes. You're storing, producing, and consuming and sharing all at the same time. So it's the advanced controls that go into battery energy storage and solar, which make them so reliable. And the direct current in this aspect is what makes it an always-on system as opposed to a backup system. And
on the picture, if you could just point to it, so like from the grid on the right bottom, when it goes into that box there before, so I'm just curious, because I know
middle box, the white
coming
one.
from the utilities perspective, the reason it's so amazing is because you see it as like one node instead of like all these distributed energy resources on solar panels throughout your city. But I've asked you several questions, as you know, but all of a sudden I was like, oh, is it like one way? Like, once it hits that box right there, that black box, then that's where the whole mesh starts and it just goes dynamically through everything?
Right, and it's up to the utility to control at your utility, in this case, you get to make the decisions.
you back at the mic, I'm sorry. Can you come back over to the mic to answer, Bobby? My.
So it's bi-directional, but that is, you're correct. It's an aggregated node at the Central Energy Park. Roughly about 50 homes, and you can factor about 50 homes, about is it about a half a megawatt per 50? About a half a megawatt per 50 homes, you could think about in aggregate. But that is the one single point of grid interconnection instead of depending on each one. But there's each home is still individually metered, just as they always have been.
That's my questions. What do you do about disproportionate users in this that inevitably happen?
It's sharing all the time. So the beauty of it if you think about distributed energy, and I've been doing, several of us have been doing this for a long time, and you think about some of the people who are using distributed energy assets. A lot of them are tinkerers. They like to kind of dabble in the latest and greatest and just see. I heard some people before the meeting started talking about their electricity bill. A lot of people, early adopters of EVs, et cetera, they like to look at the cause and effect of things. But if you think about the total population that just want it to work, right? They just want things to work. And this is a way for the utility to make that seamless for them. So the users, the consumers aren't having to go find a service contract for the solar, sign a service contract and maybe not even fully understand what they're signing up for, and then pair it with the batteries and the advanced controls. The users, they use their energy just like they always would. They're not, required to make it special adjustments. This system is designed on peak. So what that means is it's never a burden to the grid as well. So you're always
I
on peak.
maybe can't even formulate what I'm trying to.
And Delane might want to add into that.
The question that I want to ask, but we have 4 families in this 50 group that all run their air conditioning at 65 and, you know, they have 12 kids and all that kind of stuff. And so what happens to the neighbors as they think about these people?
Yeah,
I'll take that one.
yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Delane Bacon here, nice to meet everyone. The reason why it's the utility-owned asset. This is justified and built to serve the whole community. So if one house uses more and one house uses less, that's okay. That happens all the time. You build them appropriately. The reason why that works is because we have justified, as we mentioned earlier, that this is a cost-effective way to serve all of those new customers. So it's a front-of-the-meter, utility-owned asset that's just like any other generation, transmission, and distribution asset, and it supports the community in total. The fact that it's shared is what makes it effective. So instead of building just a little bit of solar or storage, like one power wall on a house, they call that a microgrid. What is it going to take you for 4 hours to run through that battery? The collective of this community together is what makes it work, because it's shared assets and it can stay on indefinitely. It's designed to be connected to the grid, to provide benefits to the grid, but not burden the grid. So you do not have to build new generation, transmission, and distribution to serve at peak, and you more cost-effectively use your existing grid. So we bring in power, that 20%, we'll bring in that 20% from the grid when it's cheaper, when it's off-peak, and we'll put it in the batteries and then serve the peak. So you're not having to do that right at the most expensive time of the day. And so that's kind of the concept of the approach.
You're sharing, but you're only paying for what you use. You might share my energy, but you got to pay for it. I'm not giving it
Right.
to you for free.
So
only pay
it
for
doesn't
what you
create
use
any
because
jealousies in between the
You're going to
neighbors?
get billed, your meter is being metered just like it typically is, and you're going to pay whatever Lakeland Electric chooses to, charge these customers. Typically, we would recommend the ordinary residential rate, and that's the way it's going to be. They're going to be neutral to that. That's how it is
Good,
with Tampa
good.
Electric's pilot project.
And so when this happens, what if you were undersized in what you put into the neighborhood and you were pulling 30% or 40% from the grid to be able to keep
As long as
everybody?
we did it off-peak, I think we'd still be fine, and I think we could certainly do that.
Do you ever go back and retro a neighborhood in terms of more
We're
capacity?
new technology, so we have the Metro site, we also have Kirkland Air Force Base out in New Mexico, and we're getting ready to kick off a pilot project in Maryland with low-income housing. But obviously, yes, that would be the plan if we ever needed to go and supplement. Obviously, there's a lot of things happening in the world, electrification, EVs. So the future is we're all in the same sandbox here in terms of trying to prepare for that. And so, yes, we would need to tweak the technology to accommodate changes, but we think that this is certainly built to accommodate what's here today.
Fascinating. Other questions, comments? Yes, Committee Member Troutman.
I was just curious if they could unpack that statement that was made earlier where they said that the technology is designed to keep the utility relevant. Can you explain that a little more?
Relevant, I think, utilities, I worked for TECO for almost 40 years, so I am a utility person, and so is my CEO, who, by the way, apologized for not being able to be here today. He certainly was going to be Rob Bennett. He lives in the summertime up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and the airline situation caused him not be able to make it here today. But we are long-term utility folks, and we know that the utilities are always going to be relevant. I think what we're wanting to do is to give you another tool in your toolbox to be able to serve customers in this new way and not be able to lose them to behind the meter solar and these other technologies that are only going to keep coming. I don't know if you've seen this happen in your territory, but I know it's happened some in Florida where developers are coming in and they're putting Teslas on every roof and power walls on every home. The thing of it is that you lose the revenue, but you don't not have to still bill your equipment because they're not there all the time. You still have to invest your generation, your transmission, your distribution, but yet you're losing your revenue stream. This is partly to solve that issue. So relevant in a way that is a good thing for utilities. This was built for utilities as a utility-owned asset.
And for the masses. energy equity being a major concern.
When you talk about this, you're talking about new neighborhoods, obviously, because it's easy and you can lay it down. But what if you had a homeowners association on a retro basis that wanted to
We
do this?
actually have, and we're actually working on a few of those. We elected to enter the market with the new residential DC application first. It's the most efficient and most reliable. Within another year, we're going to start phasing in retrofit applications.
It can certainly work with retrofits.
They get everybody to agree, though, and there's, you've got some internal hassles to go through.
Yeah, the one thing is you're putting the solar on the roof, and the roof is brand new. The solar's going to last for 30 years. The roof is going to last for 30 years. So timing it with the roof is probably one of the key things. When you're putting it on retrofits, every roof is going to be a different age, and you have to consider that.
That's true. Committee member Madden wanted to make a comment.
I like to add leading questions that you all have already taught me that I think are really exciting. So I think that, and it might be in your presentation, so I don't want to disclose it, but just because it's utility generated idea, they're trying to solve a problem, that has been difficult to integrate, solar into a community with the grid. And so taking all of those problems or opportunities and solving those is just so apparent when you hear the presentation. To me, what I thought was so phenomenal when I first heard about it was that instead of having the easement in the backyard for the poles and wires, they have the easement on the roof. And you can tell by the Mediterranean design of the homes that it's not on top of a roof. It's on the top of the roof, but it's not on the tiles.
It's raised.
Like they build it like it's an easement, so it belongs to the utility, and that section of the roof is completely impermeable, doesn't, leak, obviously, but the roof is built around it. So even if you did have to replace your roof, or something like that, that would be separate from the actual panels on the roof. So I thought you could.
Technically, you can replace the roof and leave the solar. Technically, you replace the solar and not touch the roof. The roof is independent, and there's double layer underneath it to protect.
Membrane.
Membranes, yes. I'm not, engineer, but yes, there is membranes there to protect it, and it's very well built. I think it looks very nice too, in terms of the quality of the
And will
install.
accommodate any roof too. It happens to be the rooftop that you saw at
Yeah.
South Shore Bay will accommodate any roof style.
It looked like grasslands, for example. Their HOA, I think they replace the roofs all, kind of at a certain timing. And so there could be HOAs that, they already do the roof and you could time and phase that in, with their.
In this case, as you would do that, you would be doing sections with the membrane as you went forward. But our roofs in Florida aren't 30 years lasting. They're 15 years lasting, 15 to 20.
Then that's one reason why another good thing is to build it so that you could go in and replace the roof
Right,
without.
that's
messing
very,
with the
very much so. That is a pivotal point here.
Yeah.
Because things that last 30 years, lots of places don't do that here in the sun. Yeah. Commissioner Reed.
Is there economy of scale, and is there an ideal size? Is there 50 homes, 100 homes, 1,000 homes?
Yes, 50 homes is certainly the minimum, I would say. I mean, we have even the Metro site was 37 homes, but there is certainly some economies of scale. The Central Energy Park, there are some fixed assets that get spread over a smaller number of homes, so we would like to target a minimum of 50. We also are looking at cloverleaf designs where we put 4 50s together and do a 200-home section with a shared CEP. And so we definitely think we are going to be able to handle more homes and larger sizes in the future, but right now the starting point is the 50 home.
200 is actually where you get the nice economies of scale when you cluster.
Yes.
What about multifamily affordable housing?
Yes, sure. So affordable housing, actually the Pepco project in Maryland that we're starting to break ground on this summer is an affordable, it's low, mid-income family homes. They happen to be like townhomes. So our system works really well, patio homes, townhomes.
Multifamily though.
But when you get to multifamily that are, in a raised,
Lose roof
skyscraper,
space.
you lose roof space, and the economies of scale there with this type of design.
Did you ever
So-
field any of that?
But sure, of
Yeah,
course.
It can be done. It's
Right.
just that, you're going to have to either have the solar located next to the apartments or something like that. But we have looked at some of those instances. We just have not followed through with them with the project as of yet.
Thank you.
How safe would those fielded panels be? I mean, you go into places where you want to have, affordable housing and there's, cages around the AC unit because people can come in and snatch it. So how likely is that to not happen with that type of a technology?
With ground mount solar. So I would say because ground mount solar, hasn't been the central focus of our design, we haven't spent a whole lot of time, factoring that into the neighborhoods that we're looking at. We very rarely get a mixed use piece of land where you have some light commercial, maybe a little light industrial with some residential where they have the land to also do a solar field. So we haven't quite looked at that down to that level of detail. Everything that we've done thus far and put out in performance has been rooftop solar with the batteries local.
I would add that the CEP, the Central Energy Park, does have a fence around it because that is also a protected asset that's electrified. Transformers are in there connecting it to the grid, but also equipment that we would not want to be walked away. So there is that protection around that. So if we ever did a solar field, we could probably put some type of a
barrier.
We would want that anyway and do that anyway as we'd go along, and it'd be contained within the complex. And it's less usable than the copper that you can just sell. It's less usable than a unit that you could even install somewhere else by people. So it's probably less theft oriented, but be more really because of damage by, kids playing. Yes, ma'am.
One last question.
Sure, Madden.
So, just from the affordable, obviously this is, pilot, so they're just getting started, but then if it's a good success model, then certainly then you can replicate it and then the price goes down and all the things. But in my mind, when Ashley asked that question, I thought about our 1 million square foot warehouses, and if you could do a microgrid on top of the warehouse roof next to an affordable neighborhood, is there a way that you could do kind of the solar on top of the warehouse, and then it'd be like a P3 between the neighborhood, the utility, and the industrial user?
Absolutely. I worked for a large multinational energy management firm, and that is a very popular model. We could easily partner to do those size
That's
projects
great.
as well.
Yeah, we have good opportunity for that. Well, and where we're talking about putting some multifamily by warehousing, which we have historically not done as much of in the past. So that could work. And if you want to pilot one of those things here, we would be probably a good partner to do that with. Okay.
My boss is listening. I think.
Okay, good. Other comments or questions?
I had an opportunity to talk to them for a while, and I asked a lot of questions to yours, VP. But just for the group, as far as energy in general, if everybody went solar, they would generate a lot of power. But to my understanding, there's instability. You'll generate a lot of peak power, but when it generates and when it dips, it's harder for the utility to manage, right? So one solution to that is energy storage, but the last time we talked about that, large-scale energy storage was going to be very expensive. This is an interesting approach. There's still more questions to be asked, but at least here, instead of one big solar field, you have this generation and the storage, and that should smooth everything out. So it should keep the bigger plants from having to run their peaking stations as often. And since this is new construction, not retrofits, everybody who still has their old homes, you can choose to do your own stuff. But as far as I know, most of the people that I've seen with solar, they pay just for solar, but they don't pay for the batteries. So they're generating power, but there's nothing to smooth it out. So this is one way to handle that. Just food for thought.
Well, in addition, your grid goes down for some reason. Our utility supplies that immediately through that switch, correct? Okay, so there's no uncertainty for the user. There's only certainty.
That is assuming that you do have the redundant AC distribution system installed, which we will do that in the pilot. We would hope that once you get familiar and comfortable with this direct current microgrid concept, that redundant AC system would no longer be required. But the other thing, too, is keep in mind that every one of these homes is a separate nanogrid in of itself. And so if the grid goes down, that doesn't mean all the houses go down. So it gives you time to get out there and repair whatever is causing something, and keep the system going. So we
Really-
don't really believe our grid would ever go down in
Right, you're
total.
going to, because you're independent, each
Yes.
one's a
Right,
producer.
you're not transmitting it
Got it.
thousands of
Yeah.
miles to get
I
there.
got to think
so-
differently.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Very, very interesting. Thank you very much for answering those.
Questions. Love the engagement. And it was so funny because Commissioner Madden, I was thinking I was going to hit on how the easement is on the roof. It's huge. That when we learned that, we were like, what a great concept. How did we not think of that already? Right?
That's why it needs to be done new going in, you know?
Yeah, that's the benefit. But and Mayor, one of my first questions was, how can we do this on existing homes? So I'm excited to see where that ends up.
50% of our electrical costs are air conditioning. And so when you think about that kind of pull, and then not doing, and getting the electricity supplied on off-peak hours, that is our production that supplements it, that's exciting.
Absolutely. So I'm almost done. Let me wrap up a couple more slides. The next slide that Marisol is going to pull up this is the why slide, and a lot of the stuff we've just discussed. So I'll just underline it as we go along of stuff you've already hit on. But there's six things on this that I'm going to hit on in particular. But of course, if there's something else that it catches your eye, let me know. The first one is, if Marisol, you can hit the arrow. 100% off-peak design, that's what Delane was just talking about. And one of the things, it's not adding to the capacity of the grid. They're able to sustain themselves. But another thing, and this is, Mike had brought this up, and it's a tangent off of this, but when we build this, we don't need to have the transmission, we don't need to have the poles and the wires, all the boxes that we typically have. We don't need to invest in all that, which is very expensive. Now, yes, we are investing in the hardware and infrastructure for the microgrid itself, but if you think about the costs of those delivery items, that's where Shankar really came in and helped us figure out, does it make sense? Is it apples to apples? Is it a little bit better? And it's actually a little bit better, cost-wise. So I wanted you guys to be cognizant of that it kind of balances out and to a benefit of having less cost for the infrastructure that we would typically put in there. Okay? The next arrow. Utility ownership model. This goes back to a couple of things that Ashley was saying, and then Commissioner Madden was saying about the roof. We have an easement on the roof. The solar is owned by the utility. The box is owned by the utility. So everything is controllable by the utility, and we don't even have to change our rate. It's a residential rate, so that makes it easier. I was concerned from a policy angle, we were going to have to do a whole new rate. But once we understood and kind of asked all the questions, we were like, oh, this is normal. It just happens to be a redundant system that can support itself. That's all. So, this is probably, for me, this is the most important thing. I feel like from a policy perspective, and I'll touch on this again in a minute, but I'll just go there now. Policy is going to become very interesting on microgrids. There is no law currently in the state of Florida on microgrids. We are protected. There is a law, it's 36602, where it says that only utilities that have assigned territories like Lakeland Electric can generate and sell electricity. But there are other states, and this microgrids are very popular, and I have some stuff I'm going to send you after the UC to help kind of give that more information on. But we find that, what was my point? Sorry.
That someone who would own it in other states.
Who would own it? So in other states, we're finding that other entities are going in, builders are popping in microgrids, and what Delane was saying, we don't get any benefit from that. So this allows us to be experts. It allows us to dip our toe into what a microgrid is and how it runs, build our labor. So we would find, there are staff members that we could train, and they become apprentices and learn how to manage a microgrid. So, I mean, this is a positive in that respect. I'm excited. That for me, is my personal part of it that I like the most, is that it really does protect us. And
So it would be capital intensive. Let's say a builder were going to do this themselves and they were going to try and own the grid.
yes,
You know, that would be a very capital intensive part of their neighborhood and,
Yeah.
and an unnecessary headache when you have a utility that will provide it and go, and all they need to do is build the homes.
exactly. Yeah, and we're going to talk cost in a minute, so I'll go through that too. Okay, the next arrow was the IRA, almost 30% tax credit back. That's huge. I wanted to iterate that because I know that's important. The next one, zero maintenance for homeowners. I know, me personally, I would love it if I could go more green than I currently am, but I don't know that I have the capacity to like invest the time to manage, having solar and batteries in my home. And this takes that, and I think a lot of people are like that. And so this is zero maintenance. The utility owns it, the utility runs it, and we get the maximum amount of energy out of it.
Does the technology include a predictive failure in advance of kind of system at all? Good.
Yes.
Into our product life cycle management to monitor the equipment and knowing when there could be issues with the equipment, yes.
Which is advantageous as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's lowest risk. This is something that Mike talked to me about, and I wanted to iterate it. And when you think about our RICE engines and you think about the Unit 5 repairs that we're currently doing, those are high dollar projects. And is that something that we're going to plan for, when we need new generation in another, 7 to 10 years? Or is it going to be more like this? Is it going to be a microgrid? And the cost is just so different. The cost and I'll get to that in a second, but it's just so much lower than what we're doing for the RICE and the Unit 5. Now, I'm not trying to disparage the RICE and the Unit 5. We need them. Those are critical. We cannot exist without them, right? So, but, moving forward, the centralized power stations they're going to just continue going up in price. So we got to think a different way. And then the last thing was grid edge storage capacity. Basically, if we're, like I had mentioned this before, if we have a hot day and we're at capacity, we could pull off these batteries and put them on the grid. So it becomes a mini power station in that respect. So things to think about. So I don't know if there's anything else on these that is caught anyone's eye that they want to talk about. If so, just let me know.
Well, just if you think of deliveries and the cost of transmission, and just do the south side of Lakeland that we're developing right now, which is the farthest area for lots of our transmission. If you had done these new housing areas with these microgrid systems, how it takes the pressure off of that.
It does, yeah. I was talking to Scott about that, and I said, moving forward, this is successful, we're able to do more. I asked him, I said, wouldn't we look at the territory and target the areas that if there's going to be more growth there, we would have to put a substation. Well, we could say, let's not do the substation, let's do a microgrid. So this, as you can see, it kind of checks a lot of boxes. Yeah. So
Commissioner Simmons.
Question though, what would be the maximum capacity with regard to units for the microgrid? How many would comprise a microgrid? If you have a maximum.
50 to 200 is.
Yeah, 50 to 200 in this particular model. If you're asking kind of in general in the industry, I don't know that answer, but I can definitely get that for you, what is considered. I mean, the pilot project they currently have is about 37 homes, but I mean, you can have a nanogrid be one home. So, but for this particular solution, the minimum would be, I would say 50, and they can go up to a max of 200 in that one cluster.
And you could have an 800 home project that has 4 clusters.
Okay,
Yeah.
just different clusters.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, cool. So I think the next slide is the wrap. Oh, The weeds. This is the weed slide where we have to go into the weeds and talk about things. I wanted to mention, we have been talking to a lot of builders and developers, and they are very interested. In fact, one builder in particular said to us, if you had come to me 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been interested. But since then, his corporate entity that owns his business had said, we expect you guys to be doing cutting edge sustainability projects in your home developments. So he is all about this, and we've met with him several times. With that said, if anyone, we have several people that, many local entities that we've talked to, some national, but if there's anyone that you in particular on the UC are aware of, or if someone is listening right now as we broadcast this, we're still open to identify who ultimately the builder or the developer will be for this. Okay? Cost, let's go to the cost. Here we go. $2.75 million for 50 homes. If you recall, I mentioned the GRIP grant. If we get that GRIP grant, we can build 100 homes, and it would be the same cost. So it would cut it. It basically is, half. We are covering this in our 2024 budget. Half would come out of the production capital, and half would come out of the capital for energy delivery, because, like I said before, it's a merging of the two parts of our business model. I'm still looking for federal funding opportunities, low interest to no interest grants that have, or loans, that are forgivable. And there is no incremental impact to the ratepayers. So we can make this happen. I mentioned a little bit about policy. One thing I didn't get too much into is you are not the first commission to have this brought to you. The Public Service Commission in Florida, TECO brought this to them a little over a year ago for their pilot that they're currently doing. And things have been going well. I've been reading all the reports that they've submitted. They've got a big one due in August that we'll get as well. But you're not the first commission that's had to kind of take a bite at this apple. So rest assured, Public Service Commission's on board and has been doing this for over a year now. I already mentioned 36602, but know that in the policy sector, there's going to be a lot more coming. One of the documents I'll share with you kind of goes through everything that's happening across the United States in policy with microgrid. And then finally, the timeline. The first draft of the contract is under review. We just received it this week. We will bring that to you for approval in the next couple months. We're thinking either September or October. And then the pilot construction, if you approve that, would begin in the second quarter of 2024. Okay?
Why is it 37? Didn't you say it was 37 homes on the pilot?
Yeah, am I correct?
We actually, we were working with Metro Development, and we actually almost did a 62 home up in North Pasco County. It just happened to be what was the next development that they had ready to go with, and it was 37 homes, and we took them up on it.
We can take it at whatever number we could get and done. Okay, so we're not limited. I'm sorry, I was applying that number to as a limitation to us, and it's not. Okay.
I was looking 37. Where did I say?
Sorry.
I had a moment. Okay, so you can go to the summary there. So there's our summary. That's everything we've talked about. And the next steps are I'm going to provide you guys, like I had mentioned, some additional information over the next several weeks, emails. If you're interested, read more up on it and kind of get a sense of what we're proposing here. The GRIP grant, we're hoping we'll hear in September, if we want it or not. And the UC approval of the contract in either September or October would be our anticipation.
I'm going to put a complete builder's hat on. I'm a builder now.
Okay.
What is my incremental cost to doing this in my 50-home project or savings?
As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're not putting any cost on the builder in this pilot. They're a partner. Yes? Yeah. They're a partner, and they're kind of they're going out there with us to learn this new stuff. So for a developer, it's kind of a great idea. if I were.
I'm looking for the no-win, and there is not a no-win.
Yeah, if I were a developer, I'd be all over this. Yeah.
Okay. Questions?
You mentioned how you are looking for the developer? How are you approaching and engaging the development community broadly for the opportunity?
Question. So I reached out with our community development team, and I asked for low income as well, and then our CRA as well. I've been working with them to identify builder. They're so good. They send me lists of, hey, we're working with this builder. This is the type of house they're building. Will that work? And then of course the local builders that we know here in town, because I know as, a City of Lakeland initiative, we want to encourage local. So we've also been reaching out to all the developers and home builders that are local as well. So
We could do multiple projects to get started.
yeah,
couldn't
we absolutely could. Yeah.
Okay.
If you do low-income housing, remember the ITC gets another 10%.
Yeah. So the tax credit would go up higher. We'd get 40%, almost 40% if we do low income.
Other questions? Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. And so this was, the city, this would be something that we would take on as a cost at 2.75 million. And then, what do we know about is it the battery life, or lithium batteries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do I understand at our current, solar field, we have maintenance and there's parts we can't get and stuff like that because we only have one lithium, mine in the whole North America, and that's in Canada. We don't have any in the United States. And, I'm not sure about what's gonna
It's a
happen.
limited commodity.
Supply side, and
I think definitely the panels are an issue. I actually been doing some research on outside of the lithium, but just where they're manufactured. And we're still getting panels from China,
Right.
but they're still questionable. They're not necessarily not using slave labor for them. So I started looking at the German panels. They're a little bit more pricey, but from that perspective, I don't know what the market looks like in Germany for panels. Yes, lithium plays a role in that. I think and it has nothing to do with what you're talking, but another side of the coin is all the components in the block box are custom made. Like they've built them in-house. They're not like, they haven't pulled, this piece of, machine from Germany and another piece from Mexico and another piece from the United States. They've actually built, am I speaking correctly? Everything's built in-house. So there's a less, because we've talked about that. I mean, supply chain is huge right now in the utility industry. So yes, I think there would still be probably an issue in getting the panels. But the other components I feel more comfortable about because they are all built in-house.
so they're gonna be maintenance-free here.
No. So the first 2 years, Block Energy will do the maintenance and operation for us. And then in that time, one of the plans that Scott and I have been talking about is training up staff members that potentially will be transitioned out of their current role because technology, if you think about the smart water meters, and we have a team of water meter readers, potentially they could become apprentices in microgrids and solar. And we just met with a company this week that would help us set up an apprentice program for them. So it's amazing the things that are going on right now in the industry. Whatever the need is, you just have to find the company that does it. But so.
To Commissioner Reed's point, though, on an O&M basis, as we go forward, we'd certainly have a budget for building in.
We would want it in-house, I think. I mean, initially, that's what I was talking to Gina about that. Like, we could control the cost better if it's in-house. I mean, you could, of course, just put it out to bid, but, at that point, you're at the mercy of the market. So the intention today, as I stand here, is that we would have it in-house.
Any other questions or comments? Fascinating. Yeah, and you can round out, yes.
This is just potential. I believe Tesla's investing into lithium recycling because there is a limited quantity of lithium supply. Obviously, that's not today, but hopefully one day that'll help. Something I was going to say, I forgot.
It's all right.
I remember
Join the
now.
club.
I remember. So the cost is up there. I think what would be good is a comparison of ROI. So if we spend this, what's the return on investment?
Okay.
Because I'm not aware of the costs for the traditional infrastructure. So between doing this versus what we do today.
We have a model and that's what Gina and Shankar worked on. So I can share that with you guys. I don't know, hold on a second. Does the model have ROI? Is it? It's net present value. It's net present value, but you have one that's ROI. Okay, so the one that we did in-house is net present value, but we can show you one from Block that has ROI.
Okay, compared to.
Okay, yeah, so
today.
I'll forward that information to everybody.
And I remember one more thing. Good question, Commissioner Reed. So from what I've learned about lithium batteries, they pretty much last for a long time, depending on whether they're lithium iron or lithium ion. There's different chemistries. But pretty much, to my understanding, what affects their life the most is the cycles. So depending on the grade of the batteries that we get, are they 5,000 life cycles or 8,000? It just depends on how much they're charged and recharged, like your phone. But if they're not charged and recharged 5,000 or 8,000 times, they could last 20 years or more. To my understanding, they don't ever really go to zero. They just might be 80% or 70%. So the lithium that we put in, I'm not saying there won't be any cost, because I don't know what those will be. But depending on how much they get charged and discharged and how fast, they could last at least 15 years or more, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's
what we were going to,
Yep.
and ours is 4,000.
Sorry.
yeah, that's what we were expecting as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're right on target. Yep. So we'll be back in the future with more information. We got to work through the contract now, and then we'll present that for you guys to review and make sure that we've covered everything and that you're satisfied.
We'll give you a chance to get a grip on it all.
Yes, it will. Thank you for the wonderful pun. I love it. Okay. All right, we good?
Yes.
Okay, thank you
Good,
guys.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
One comment about the conference, and I don't know if Commissioner Madden or a committee member, or Suvan or Cindy, has any other comments about the APPA conference. But one thing I would say, it's kind of comes to your question, Commissioner Reed. At the conference, and everywhere you look, there's a tremendous amount of momentum around moving toward renewable future. Anytime the conversation comes up about this is a problem, that's a problem, we know that solar panels being made in countries that we don't, that we have issues with, that batteries having issues and all of these things. We know those are issues, but you never hear anymore the conversation, well, does that mean we should go back to base load generation? It's always, we'll solve that, we'll fix that, we'll figure it out. And so our interest in this technology in particular is, it was kind of the same thing we started building a lot of solar. There's only so much land. And if you ride around Lakeland, you see things being cleared everywhere and houses are going up. So we're interested in trying to get in where we have the opportunity to do those possibly clusters of, 4 200s and 800 homes. I mean, you really start to move the needle, as Gina pointed out earlier, when you get that much solar out there, you start to kind of move the dial a little bit. So we're very interested. We're going to continue to move this and come back to you with, hopefully a contract we can put out there and continue moving forward, get the builders on board and have this happen, because I really believe this is going to be some part of the solution. It won't be the entire solution, but it's going to play a part, I really believe. So I think we ought to get on board now while we have the land, before it gets to be the latest, greatest thing that everybody wants to do, and we pay the going price at that point. So that's our interest in moving it forward, and that's kind of the overall what I took out of the conference as well. So I don't know if any of the rest of you still have other comments about the conference.
I did just want to finish, not so much even about the annual conference, but I did want to say that, a couple of committee meetings, again, we talked about with the legislation at the state level, just when, kind of when we feel some of that SWOT analysis with regard to our utility and our dividend, things like that. I did want to follow up that Cindy has been, strategically addressing that to make sure we're telling our story. And so she coordinated a meeting with Corey and with her intern Lauren, and we went to go see Senator Burton just to make sure, as a mature senator who's represented Lakeland Electric and from our area, has the talking points, understands some of the nuances and the different legislation, or what even is the motive behind those things. So we're doing that, kind of continuing that at the state level. And then, you heard Cindy mention her looking into these IRA grants, and I've kind of joked about, like, since ARPA and all the money, I'm like, listen, this is a once-in-a-generational opportunity. Let's make sure we are making use of any money that we can get with these grants. But I have been the American Public Power Association's Policymaker Council member for the Southeast, and so twice a year going to DC. That's coming up in July, and I went in December. But one of the things that we say, as a Policymaker Council member to our congressmen and women, is that we need to have tax credits, even though we're, public utilities and don't pay taxes. If you want us to explore making capital investments into clean energy, we need to have commensurate incentives as the investor-owned utility. So whether that's a direct tax credit back to the utility, or we could share that with an entity like the Block Energy, we want to have credits. And so this is a big part of the IRA, to be able to extend tax credits and to get direct pay to public utilities. We did not have that before. So I just wanted to be like, go APPA, PMC. I mean, that's why, it's what I'm kind of doing behind the scenes to make sure that we have those incentives and they're looking out for public power. And APPA was able to nominate 2 people from the Policymaker Council to go to the Legislative Energy Horizon Institute. It's a cohort of folks throughout the country who advocate on behalf of public power in Congress. And so I'll be going on Friday to the Washington National Lab and being able to go to go to see a hydroelectric dam, and then you have like 4 days of concentrated education all day long, so that you know what you're talking about, because energy is being disrupted and there's so much to learn, to just really download you for 4 days. It's this on Friday this next week, and then again in October it'll be in DC. So, and APPA PMC is paying for it. It's not the city of Lakeland. So, that's exciting that we're just all doing what we can at Lakeland Electric to make sure, and then this utility committee as well, to get educated so that we can use taxpayer dollars and ratepayer dollars as efficiently as possible.
That's a good job. Good job.
Probably won't. You'll have to meet with me individually. I'll be so excited after 4 days of going over this. You'll be like, don't give her a microphone.
No, I'll tell you, we all need your inoculations, so it's helpful. That's great. Other comments or questions? Do you have anything else you'd like to bring up, Mr. Beckham?
Sure, that's it.
All right, that ends our meeting. Thank you very much for being here.
Ramona today?